Welcome to Part 3 of Blessed Seraphim Roses in Defense of Father Dimitry Dudko. One should say a few words about the so-called Tychonites, the true Orthodox Christians. I have met them, rejoiced at their moral steadfastness, rejoiced even at their conservatism, rejoiced at their courage and asceticism, but I've taken a look at them, and they have no unanimity. And the chief thing about them, they have almost no priesthood. The leadership has been taken over by women dressed in black like nuns, who consider everyone to be heretics, and only themselves infallible. They should be put in a museum, and I speak without irony, in a museum where people could look at them and even learn something. But after all, life is not a museum. Some of the Tychonites have begun to preach celibacy for everyone, but can everyone take this? Many of them suffer for years without communion. One such person came to me. I spoke with him, and he received communion. And you should have seen how he instantly came to life. And so, whether we wish or not, we must take into consideration the hierarchy which we have. What should we do? I think that, being together with everyone, we should strive to revive church life. But how? This question is like a nail driven into our brains. O Lord, have you really abandoned us? It is easy to observe from outside. But how difficult it is to do something, it is unbearable, impossible. But one must do something. The question stands thus: either live or perish. To perish is not the same thing as deciding the question abstractly. And you who try to draw a conclusion from whole matter, do not take just one tendency be an example. I think that everyone now wants to find a way out. We're sick and tired of atheism. It has become repugnant even to the atheists. If possible, carefully support us. Here I appeal to the West. Try not to remake us to somehow fit your own situation. The Russians have their own path. You can lure them into another one, but you will see that you will get no good from it. Each one goes on his own path. We are going on the path of Golgotha, a difficult one, such is God's will. If you support our cross, thank you. We need nothing more than this. We must find the way out ourselves. If we do this, perhaps we will have something new to say to you also. No open-minded Orthodox Christian in the West can read such a statement, which comes from a deeply suffering Orthodox heart, without feeling great sympathy for Father Dimitry and all like him who are trying to find their way out of the literally unparalleled and impossible situation in which they find themselves within the Moscow Patriarchate and in an atheist society. One cannot quote canons to a drowning person. We cannot turn away from such people and tell them to join the catacomb church before we will offer them our support. The agony of suffering orthodoxy in our days cannot always be by a change of jurisdictions. Even in the Free West the jurisdictional situation is immensely complicated. Some of those who see things in terms of either / or think that all new calendarist Greeks, for example, should simply join the old calendarists. But many new calendarist Greeks have found the situation of the old calendarists in Greece, with their innumerable jurisdictions and sometimes extreme and ignorant views, to be exactly the same situation that Father Dimitry finds in the catacomb church in Russia, and they have rejected this logical conclusion, logical to outsiders who don't have to face the actual choices involved, in order to join the Synod of the Russian Church outside of Russia. But this also is an irregular and abnormal solution which produces its own conflicts and problems, and no one has a right to demand of anyone else that they join the Synod as the answer to the ever more open apostasy of the new calendarist Greek bishops. If someone can do this, and find his place in this jurisdiction without falling into the pitfall of criticizing his bishops and spreading the atmosphere of suspicion that prevails among Greek old calendarists, and thus coming into conflict with the clergy and believers of the Synod, well and good, but no one can demand this of anyone. The situation of Father Dimitry in many respects is identical with that of those new calendarist Greek priests who are aware of the false path of their own bishops but are unable to join the old calendarists because of the confusion and extremism to be found in their ranks, not, of course, among all old calendarists, but in enough of them to make the situation very confusing and difficult. Father Dimitry does not have the third alternative of joining the Synod, although it is quite clear from his own statements that this is precisely what he would do if the choice were his, that is, if he were to be exiled to the West. Here, for example, are some of his words about the Russian church outside of Russia in one of his last tape-recorded talks before his arrest. They have to preserve tradition in the West. This is better and more convenient for them. Let it be that it is the old women there, but they also can do much. We know who is pained over Russia, for whom Russia is dear, even if there may be among them some extreme views. I will say that I am very thankful to the Synodal Church outside of Russia, because it is most of all people from there that, when they come here, I feel they are mine. It is so pleasant to speak with them. Perhaps not everyone in the church outside of Russia understands me, but for the most part they do understand. And I'm not offended. When people from the autocephalous American church came, there were good talks, but I feel that they have a somewhat Western outlook. They tell me that I am of a Slavophile tendency. I acknowledge, of course, that I am really a Russian, a priest, and that I have a Russian attitude, without being separate from the fullness of the church. Both a Russian priest and the Russian church are partial phenomena which must enter into the whole. But before me always and first of all is the church. It is to the church that I strive to bring people. In the Soviet Union, as nowhere else in the world, it is impossible to apply strict jurisdictional labels. In the Moscow Patriarchate there have been betrayer bishops, and the very principle of Sergianism is a betrayal of orthodoxy, as Father Dimitry has said. This is why the Free Russian Church outside of Russia can have no communion with this jurisdiction. But in the same Moscow Patriarchate there is an increasing number of priests like Father Dimitry Dudko who do not participate in this betrayal, but speak in the spirit of the Catacomb Church and the Free Russian Church outside of Russia. We even know of at least one catacomb priest, and probably there are others, who deliberately entered the Moscow Patriarchate in order to bring the grace of God to more people than is possible in the small cells of the Catacomb Church. Thank you for listening. Please continue with Part 4.